Everyone knows that story from grade school, right? In 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue and discovers America. But what if I told you that the version of the story we all learned is missing its most important character? That the real spark for this world-changing event wasn't in Spain, it wasn't even on a ship, but hundreds of miles away, with an empire that was essentially holding the world's most important trade routes in a chokehold. That's the real story, the hidden one we're getting into today. Because when you really dig into it, that's what this is all about. The discovery of the Americas, it was never the goal. It wasn't some grand expedition to find a new world. Nope. It was a massive, unintended, almost unbelievable consequence of a huge economic and political power struggle that had basically brought Europe to its knees. So, okay, let's just do a quick recap of the story we're all familiar with. The year is 1492. You've got this Italian explorer, Christopher Columbus, and he's sailing for Spain. He heads west, straight out into the Atlantic, on a journey that, well, is about to completely redraw the map of the world forever. But here is the absolute key detail that so often gets glossed over. Columbus wasn't looking for a new world. Not at all. He was looking for a back door. His whole mission was to find a new, hopefully faster, sea route to the super lucrative spice markets in Asia. And, this is the most important part, he needed to find a way to get there that avoided the incredibly powerful Ottoman Empire. And, well, we all know how that played out. Turns out his math on the size of the Earth was, let's just say, wildly optimistic. He never got anywhere near Asia. Instead, he lands in the Caribbean and basically trips over two massive continents that Europe had absolutely no idea were even there. It was just a colossal, world-altering accident. So this brings us to the real question that flips the whole story on its head. Why? Why take such a huge, insane risk, sailing off into a completely unknown ocean? What was so terrible about the trade routes they already had? Well, the answer to that lies to the east. And that answer, in two words, is the Ottoman Empire. By the middle of the 1400s, this massive empire had become the ultimate gatekeeper between Europe and Asia. They controlled the legendary Silk Road, they controlled the other key land routes, they controlled everything. And this, as you can imagine, created a huge problem for European merchants. Before the Ottomans really locked things down, trade was pretty straightforward. But afterward, they were in charge. They could tax the heck out of it, they could disrupt it, or they could just cut it off whenever they felt like it. All of a sudden, Asian spices, silks, and all these other goods became crazy expensive luxury items. Europe was basically being held in an economic chokehold. So you have to understand, this wasn't really about adventure or exploration in the way we think of it. This was about economic survival. The pressure to break free from the Ottoman grip created this frantic, decades-long race among European nations to find a new way, any new way to get to the riches of the East. And it's that desperation that leads us straight to the accident. See, the mission was never, let's find new lands. The mission was, let's find a new path to the old ones. The discovery of the Americas was just the most shocking, unexpected plot twist in that entire saga. I mean, listen to how one source puts it. Had Europeans maintained easy access to the Silk Road, there would have been far less motivation. Just think about that for a second. If trade had just stayed open, stayed affordable, there would have been no desperate race across the Atlantic. Columbus might never have sailed. The history we know just wouldn't exist. You can literally trace a straight line of cause and effect here. The Ottomans disrupt trade in the mid-1400s. That creates desperation in Europe to find new routes. That desperation is what gets Columbus the funding for his voyage in 1492. And that voyage results in the totally unintended discovery of the Americas. One event leads directly, and I mean directly, to the next. And once that accidental contact was made, oh man, the consequences started to ripple out across the entire planet. It created a completely new economic reality that nobody could have predicted. And the outcomes were just profoundly different depending on which side of the Atlantic you happened to be on. For Europe, it was a massive injection of wealth. We're talking gold, silver, sugar that literally fueled the rise of new empires. But for the Americas, it brought exploitation, the horror of new diseases that their populations had no immunity to, and the utter destruction of entire cultures. It's a really complex and, frankly, often tragic legacy. When you boil it all down, this moment completely shifted the entire axis of global power. It wasn't about who controlled the land anymore. It was about who controlled the seas. This was the birth of the interconnected global economy that we're all a part of today. But that brings us to the last and maybe the most fascinating irony in this whole story. What happened to the empire that started it all, the ones who set all of these events in motion in the first place? It's like watching a perfect set of dominoes fall. First, the Ottomans make a power move to control all the land trade. That action forces a reaction from the Europeans, who start scrambling for sea routes. That reaction leads to the gigantic accident of discovering the Americas. That accident causes a massive shift in global trade, away from land and onto the sea. And the final consequence, the Ottomans, the ones who started the whole thing, are slowly but surely left behind economically. It's just so ironic. In their attempt to completely dominate the old world's trade, they accidentally kicked off the creation of a brand new one, a world centered on ships and Atlantic trade routes, which eventually made their control over the Silk Road pretty much irrelevant. Their greatest strategic win planted the seeds of their own long-term economic decline. And that really leaves us with a huge thought to chew on, doesn't it? This whole story is just a dramatic reminder that history is so often driven by things nobody saw coming. An action you take to solve one problem in your corner of the world can end up creating a completely new reality for everyone everywhere. It just goes to show that even the most calculated moves can set off a chain reaction that no one, not even a mighty empire, can ever fully predict or control.